Kia ora koutou, Markie here. You may have noticed that you can't see my ugly mug and you're looking at my computer screen for reasons which will become apparent later, because we're looking at the 5-factor model of personality. So this is a video that should be relevant and interesting to any one of you, provided you either have a personality, or if you don't have a personality, that you have to interact with people that do have personalities. So it's relevant to everyone. So people that follow this channel for the material on retroactive jealousy, it will be particularly relevant because this is a model that can help you develop self-awareness and self-knowledge, and self-awareness and self-knowledge promotes healing. Know thyself. So and that's really what this channel is all about, really, is information and knowledge to promote well-being and healing and a better world, I guess. Although we cover all kinds of other things. We talk about kind of grammar, and I occasionally talk about things that just irritate me and have a bit of a rant and a grumble. You know, the higher motive of this channel is to actually improve the quality of people's lives through knowledge and information. So this is a model. It's called the 5-factor model. Sometimes it's called the Big Five. Sometimes it's called the O.C.E.A.N model. The O.C.E.A.N is an acronym for the 5 factors, and it measures personality in a qualitative way. In other words, it measures the quality of personality, as in the nature of personality. So it's not a measure of how good or bad a personality is. It's just a measure of different aspects of personality and how people score in each one of them. So it's a very simple thumbnail snapshot way of capturing somebody's personality, but I say it's simple. It accounts for a huge amount of complexity, but it encapsulates things in a simple and easy to understand way. That's the best way to explain it, really. So it's it just is a measure of personality. It's not a measure of pathology. It's not about, you know, whether, you know, somebody's suffering from illnesses, or, you know, mental illness, or cognitive difficulties or anything like that. It's just purely measures personality, or gives a snapshot of personality. So it does a similar kind of job to things like the Myers-Briggs model, which was based on some Jungian concepts. Approaches it in a whole different way. So it's not in competition with, you know, I'm not saying, you know, that this is better or that Myers-Briggs is better. It's very different, but it's approaching the same thing, essentially personality. So it's a psychometric. So what we mean by psychometric, psycho means the mind, strictly speaking it means the soul, but it's come to mean the mind, and metric means to measure. So to measure the mind, or to measure something, to measure a psychological factor. So psychometric. So people talk about psychometric tests. So the place where people most often talk about psychometric tests is with some job interviews. Some job interviews, they'll give you psychometric tests, but they're also used clinically. So there are a whole range of different kinds of psychometric tests, often ones that do measure pathology. You know, they might measure, for example, there's the Beck's depression inventory that measures, you know, is a good way of measuring in a snapshot whether somebody's experiencing depressive symptoms or not. There's ones for anxiety. There are ones that measure almost everything. So it's like the Milon 5 is an amazing one that you know, it tells you what you had for breakfast. But this is just measuring personality, and it breaks personality into 5 factors. Funny that, because it's called the 5-factor model, and that's why. So O.C.E.A.N, which I've put in green there. Openness, Conscientiousness, Extroversion, Agreeableness, and Neuroticism. That's what those 5 letters stand for. Now, agreeableness is a horrible use of English, but I'm going with it because that's what they use. Okay, it should be agreeability. I've done a whole video on this. I think I put a picture of Loch Ness Monster on the front, and talked about nesses, because people will turn a lot of words into, you just put ness on the end of lots of words, and lots of words don't sit well with a ness on the end of them. They sit better with an ability. But there we go. We won't get into that one. But if you want to check out that video, check out my series on accurate and elegant spoken English. So that's another one of my little bugbears. So, before we get into what each of these factors mean, just to explain how the model came about. So Myers-Briggs is a good one to kind of compare and contrast with this. Not in great depth or detail, because I don't know a great deal about Myers-Briggs. I've kind of done my personality on it and talked about it a little bit. So I've got a very vague understanding of Myers-Briggs in detail. But in principle, Myers-Briggs is based on a theoretical model. Okay, so Carl Jung, who was an amazing guy, came up with some fascinating ideas, including things like he gave us introvert and extrovert, and he had a lot of theoretical ideas on what made up personality. He had a whole model of personality based on a theory, hence the theoretical model. This is not based on theory. This is actuarian, is that the right word? This is based on statistics and research. So this is based on effectively asking millions of people. Oh no, my screen's gone blank. Asking millions of people. I don't know if it's millions, but certainly thousands. Sorry, it's all gone badly wrong now. You're seeing thumbs in front of the screen here. It's all going wrong. That was better. Cool. Panicked then, didn't I? We'll come on to that in a moment. That features in this scale. Asking people lots of questions and identifying correlations. So if somebody answers yes to a question about X, they found that they're also more likely to answer yes to a question about Y, but less likely to answer yes to a question about A, B, and C. So basically, they got masses of data and ground them in a big mincer, and this came out. So it's very, 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 very scientific. So it's not influenced by philosophical thought or people's biases about what makes up personality, because you could discuss what personality is. There could be one of those late night beer-driven conversations that could go on for hours or days. What is personality? What isn't personality? What makes up personality? This just asked a lot of people questions. And questions that they kind of asked were kind of stuff like, about things that people enjoyed. Do you like for example, do you like philosophical conversations is one of the questions. Questions about, do you like to visit art galleries? All those kinds of things. Now, there are a couple of questionnaires that you can use to work out your 5-factor personality model. I advise caution with them. I've been playing with them for a little while now, and I think some of the questions aren't brilliantly well worded. I think because they're generally created for a North American demographic, and they don't always translate well into other cultures, and they can be quite misleading. While I think this is a brilliant model, I'm not overly thrilled about the questionnaire that's used. But you can go online and do a questionnaire, and you can do it for free. And what it will do is there's different ones, but the one that I often use or use with people, you can do it for free, and it gives you all the data or the statistical outcome. So basically, each of those 5 factors, you have a percentage, and it gives you all of that. And then what it does is it gives you a breakdown of a detailed breakdown of 2, say, or 3 of the factors, explaining what they mean in terms of personality relating to you. But they don't give you the whole schmozzle unless you pay. which I don't think is a lot. I think it's about 25 quid or what have you. I've never, I've always worked with people or been with people and done this, and I'm able to interpret it for them, so they don't need to pay their money on that. You could pay for that. I think probably the best thing to do the questionnaire is, wherever this is based on experience, where I've used the questionnaire with people, sometimes it's been very accurate, but sometimes just the misinterpretation of one or two questions I've noticed will just throw the whole thing completely out. So it's something to use with caution. I prefer to use this as a model for just my own understanding of people's personalities based on my knowledge of them, just as a tool for me to help to understand them. I find the questionnaire it has its faults, I think. Well, one thing you can do to make the questionnaire a little bit more reliable, and I think this is a good idea, and this isn't just my recommendation, this is because I've had some training in this and that's what's been recommended as well, is that you get somebody who knows you to fill in the questionnaire, basically answering what they think you would answer, or what they think would be an accurate answer for you. They might think you're a little liar pants on fire, so they might answer differently, and then calculate the mean of your two answers for each factor, and that will is generally supposed to give you a more accurate measure of it, really. So what we're looking at, this is why I like it, because it's simple. So what you get basically, you get 5 percentage figures. Okay, so each factor is scored from 0 to 100, and generally speaking, there's no good or bad, in this, but there are, broadly speaking, it is generally healthy to be somewhere in the middle for most things. Although there are certain things that so people with high levels of conscientiousness, for example, that's a very strong measure for success. Quite how they measure success, I don't know, but generally speaking, so if you do this, you're not trying to get high scores, and you're not trying to get low scores. It is what it is, and really the worth of it really is in the relationship between the different factors and how they interrelate. That's what kind of expresses the dynamic of your personality, and it can tell a lot. You can establish an awful lot from it, but don't go looking at this thinking this is a good score, this is a bad score. Generally speaking, scores in the middle can be quite good, or scores in the middle quarter probably. Scores that are extremely high or extremely low often indicate an extreme, which can be problematic. But that's an oversimplification, really. Is how they all react together. Okay, so I hope you're all still with me. So I'll have a glug of water, and we'll go through the factors. And then the factors are kind of broken down into facets, and that's been done in different ways. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm going to make it really simple. And most of what's written here you can kind of ignore, really. So, so the first one, not that they come in any particular order, but if you're using the acronym to help you remember it, O.C.E.A.N, then you would use it in the order of the acronym, wouldn't you? I suppose you could do it backwards if you're a clever dicky, but generally speaking it's presented in the order of O.C.E.A.N. So it begins with openness, because openness begins with an O, and by openness we don't just mean general openness, how open you are, it's openness to experience. Now, a kind of word of caution, be careful with some of the terminology. Not only is some of it very bad English, but it's sometimes these words, like they're words that are in common usage but are used in a different way. So don't be thrown by some of the language. Be open to learning the specific meaning of each of these in its context, not outside of its context. So openness doesn't necessarily mean how open somebody is, you know, because we talk about people being open, don't we? Some people we say, oh, they're very closed. Some people are very open. It does stray into that kind of territory, but that's not really what it means. So openness to experience. Okay, so ignore the bit at the top because we're going to come back to that and finish on that. But have a look at the bit that says 6 facet breakdown. Now it's going all funny and jazzy because I'm pointing the camera at the screen. I will put this in the description box below the video. If it's not there now, don't panic because I haven't done it yet. So they actually broken this down into 6 facets. So it's 5 factors, 6 facets in this particular breakdown of it. And different people have worked with this model, so there are differences. So where I've put, like for example, I've put 6 facet breakdown. I put number 1 has got imagination stroke fantasy. That's because one group of people would prefer to use the term imagination, and the other prefer to use the term fantasy. They both agree on the meaning, but they just have a different way of expressing the meaning. So that's what's going on here. So imagination and fantasy, artistic interest, aesthetics, emotionality, feelings, adventurousness, action, intellect, ideas, liberalism and values. Okay, so if you want to, you can, and the questionnaire obviously takes all this into account, but they're the different facets of it. So you could score very highly on 1, and you know, zilch on 6. So you could, in theory, you could have a high or a low score of openness, but you could be quite high and quite low on these different ones respectively. So it's a cluster of things, but I'm not going to dwell too much on those. Oh, Gordon Bennett, that's happened again. That's really irritating. See if other channels are really slick, but you don't get this kind of homely experience that you do with my channel anywhere else. This is unique and special. So I'm going to go through some of these just to clarify them where they might be a little bit misleading, but what I prefer to do is focus on the 2 facet breakdown, which is much more simple and straightforward. But what I wanted to do, partly why I wanted to do this video, is because I'm learning this model. I've been working with it for a long time, but I'm learning more and more. I've just done some additional training on it recently. So I thought it would be good for me to just consolidate my own learning, and also I'm always telling people about this model. It's far easier if I can actually just send them a video and say this is the model, and then they can you know, listen to it in the comfort of their own homes and in their own time, or they can politely ignore it and hope that I go away. But I don't have to kind of bend people's ear about the model when I'm in the room with them, which is probably quite tedious for them, really. So that's and also I realised that I've had to collate this information from lots of different sources. So my favourite source of all information is YouTube. I go to YouTube for a lot of things. This isn't all available. All this information that I'm presenting in this breakdown here is not available, as far as I am aware, in this format, in one source. You would have to look at several sources and some non-YouTube sources to get all this information all in one place. So that's the other reason I'm doing it, is just to make that available as one source for all of this stuff, really. Which hopefully will be really useful. So I'm going to name the sources that I recommend on this. So if you want to go into more detail on the 6 facet breakdowns of any of these 5 factors, then the go-to person is Dr. Todd Grande, who has a psychology channel. And he's got videos on each one of these, and he goes into them and explains them more in detail. So which is part of the reason why I'm not going to go into those 6 factor breakdowns on everything. Check his videos out for that; they're very good. The 2 factor breakdown comes from Jordan Peterson. Now some people are going to boo and hiss when I mention the word Jordan Peterson. Suspend your prejudice around Jordan Peterson. He's a man who it's become quite controversial in terms of some of his views around the Canadian laws that were brought in around people with different gender identities, and that's upset a lot of people, particularly in the trans communities. I'm a huge supporter of the trans community. I work in that field a lot, but I think you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a very complex issue which I won't get into here, but I feel that I can be perfectly loyal to trans acceptance, and at the same time learning a great deal from Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's got an awful lot to say, and also says it in a very accessible way, really. So check out some of his videos on this stuff. So they're my two main sources, but they sort of looked at others as well. So, okay. So just to put the 6-factor breakdown on this one to bed. So remember, where there are 2 items listed with a slash or oblique in between, like imagination and fantasy, that's different groups of people that use this model using different language for the same thing. Okay, so liberalism at the moment and values. Okay, don't confuse that with political liberalism. There is a link with this model. You can actually work out people's politics using this model, which is fascinating. But what liberalism means, it's liberalism with a small l, even though I put it there with a big one. Liberalism means adherence to rules. So we're not talking about people who are part of the Liberal Party, or people who are Democrats, or part of the Labour Party, or the Liberal Party even. It doesn't mean that in this particular sense. But ignore the 6-factor breakdown for now. If you want to know all about that, then Dr. Todd Grande will give you all you need to know on that, far more accurately than I could. But let's look at the 2-factor breakdown: creativity and intellect. Okay, so openness to experience, creativity and intellect. So intellect doesn't necessarily mean exactly the same thing as IQ. So intellect is more an interest in intellectual ideas. So people who are high in openness to experience, they are people that would enjoy theories, they enjoy the abstract, they enjoy philosophical conversations with or without the use of substances. So you can talk. So if you were low in intellect, you would probably not be listening to this video, because this is about theory and ideas, and things that aren't concrete. So you're probably quite high in openness to experience by virtue of being high in intellect. And then creativity, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a brilliant artist. It just means that you enjoy, you're more likely to enjoy the arts, and you're more likely to think in a creative way. So people who are high in openness to experience are the kind of people who don't like to confine things to boxes. They like to blur boundaries. So somebody who's got high openness to experience. If you're a musician, you probably be somebody that fuses different musical genres. If you're interested in politics, then you would probably be interested in different political ideologies and how they can be combined, or how you can take elements from both. So openness to experience. So people who, so I talked about gender identity earlier on. So people who are, the whole concept of a non-binary gender, which is something I've covered in other videos. If it doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry for now. This is just used for an example. So people that are open to the idea of a non-binary gender are people who have an openness to experience, because a non-binary gender by its nature is not confining gender to 2 boxes of male or female. It's openness to the idea that gender can be more than that. That there can be You know, there is more than black and white, that there are many shades of grey. And people who have an openness to experience like exploring new territories intellectually, and, you know, potentially literally as well. So one of the things on the 6 facet breakdown is got adventurousness and action. So openness to experience. So if you've got high openness to experience, you might be more interested in travel to new places and things like that, for example. So that would include that one. Okay, so we're going to run through some of the others probably more quickly, not because I'm going to go into any less detail, but because we've covered a lot of the background, so I could just kind of hit the ground running with them. And explain them without having to give all the context. So conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a word with lots of connotations. Just let them go, because conscientiousness doesn't necessarily mean the same thing that it does in everyday parlance. Although some of it will. There'll be a degree to which it does, and a degree to which it doesn't. Okay, so. I can see that the 6 factor breakdown, I'll just go through that quickly. Self-efficacy, confidence, orderliness, order, dutifulness, achievement striving, self-discipline, cautiousness and deliberation. Okay, so but we're just going to look at the 2 facet breakdown. So orderliness and industriousness. Okay, so you could be high in one and low in the other, and that could still give you high conscientiousness. So orderliness, as in the generally understood meaning of the word. So something that's orderly is probably going to be organised. They're going to be tidy. They are going to be good at timekeeping. They'll turn up on time. They'll be efficient. And any other meaning of the word orderliness, really. And industriousness doesn't mean that you're, you know, involved in industry. It means, you know, hard working. So if you're industrious, you know, you're going to be you're going to work hard. You've probably got a work ethic, but not just a work ethic. You know, you're able to get stuck in. You like to get stuck into things, and for example, looking at kind of from the just jumping back to the 6 factor facet breakdown, self-discipline. So somebody that's high in industriousness, they're probably going to be able to tolerate working in you know, unpleasant or challenging conditions in order to get the job done. You know, the people that can, you know, get up early in the morning, go out in the cold. You know, do something that's quite physically hard work, and, you know, not waver, not kind of knock it on the head because it's too hard. Let me just sip in some water. Extroversion. Okay, so extroversion as in the quality of being an extrovert, but not exactly the same as extrovert we would talk about in the general meaning of the word, or in the kind of Jungian meaning of the word, but you know, but that does come into it. Okay, but it's more precisely defined than that. So it includes lots of different factors there. If we go through the 6 facet breakdown, friendliness and warmth, gregariousness, assertiveness, activity and activity level, excitement seeking, cheerfulness and positive emotions. Okay, so the 2 facet breakdown, which is the one I prefer, simpler, assertiveness and enthusiasm. Okay, so you could have one but not the other, just like with any of the others. You could be high in enthusiasm, low in assertiveness, but that gives you a degree of extroversion. So it's a lot to do with how you engage with other people, really. Agreeableness, the bad English one. I think how agreeable you are is a fairly good measure of what this means in terms of, you know, the general understanding of the word agreeable. So somebody that's agreeable, I mean, it's not a word that we use very often, is it? we don't often describe people as being agreeable or disagreeable. Disagreeable was quite a commonly used word, sort of end of the 1800s, early 1900s. So if someone was a bit of an arse, then often they would be described as disagreeable. So by virtue of that, somebody that's pleasant would be described as agreeable. But it breaks down into more than that. So six facet breakdown. Trust. So people who are agreeable tend to be trusting. As in they trust other people. They're not overly suspicious people. Then we've got morality and straightforwardness. Morality is a bit of a misleading term here. Straightforwardness is a more straightforward term. So people who are tend to be more honest, not people who are high in levels of deceit or not overly guarded. So some people who might not appear that straightforward aren't necessarily being deceitful or lying, but they might be reserved or guarded because of a fearfulness and a lack of trust. So it kind of fits with the trust. Altruism, cooperation and compliance, modesty. So what that means is not about the clothes you wear, not whether you have a plunging bosom, not that kind of modesty. Modesty as in blowing your own trumpet or not. And then sympathy, tender-mindedness. There's a word and a half. I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be two words or one word, or whether it should be hyphenated. So I took that from actually a piece of information on a video. So I put it all as one word, which is probably not correct. But the two-facet breakdown, which is one that we prefer because it's simpler, politeness and compassion. Okay, politeness and compassion. Now, this is a good one to talk about when we, just to give the example of why it's not necessarily good to have very high scores in any of these particular facets. Because if you are too agreeable, you're not going to be taken seriously. You're likely to be used and abused by people. And if you're the opposite, if you're very, very disagreeable, then it's your human interactions aren't going to be pleasant. You're probably not going to have many friends. You're not going to be liked. But actually, to be reasonably low in agreeableness is an asset in a lot of areas. So entrepreneurs tend to be quite low in agreeableness, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I'm very high in agreeableness. I'm too high in agreeableness, and therefore I'm not always very good. I'm terrible in business, really, because I kind of sell myself short and I give too much and all that kind of thing. Whereas successful business people have got a bit more of an edge to them. They've got to be in sales, you can't be too agreeable. And so you have to kind of pretend to be agreeable. You have to be agreeable enough to kind of form a rapport with somebody in sales. But if you're too agreeable, you just couldn't do sales because you would your negotiation skills would be really bad. So that's good. So to be somewhere in the middle of agreeableness is quite good. But to be right at the top, 100 out of 100 in agreeableness, that is not great. And to be 0 or 1 in agreeableness is not great either. But to be 50, that's probably kind of a good place to be. So a lot of people need to learn to be less agreeable, and some people need to learn to be more agreeable. It depends where we are and where we fit in the scheme of things. Because we don't need to change at all. It's just about if we want to, about whether that's going to benefit our life or not. And I might just revisit some. We'll go back over some of the others as well and talk about what it's like to be at the top of the scale, and what it's like to be at the bottom of the scale, because I haven't done that on those. But we'll come back and look at some of those. We'll look at, if we've got time, we'll look at some of the interrelations between the two and what that can mean, because that's really interesting. So neuroticism. Okay, so it's quite an old-fashioned word now, neuroticism. So basically, mental illness used to be broken down into two categories: psychosis and neurosis. Psychosis is where you kind of lost touch with reality, and neurosis was where you didn't, essentially. So neurosis would include things like depression and anxiety and phobias and OCD. Although OCD, you do lose a little bit. You can lose touch with reality, but not in the same kind of way. So neuroticism, generally, what they're referring to here is depression and anxiety and anger, and that's reflected in the 6 facet breakdown. So anxiety, in the broadest sense of the word. Anger or angry hostility, depression, self-consciousness, immoderation and impulsiveness. I put temptation in brackets there, meaning that, so in terms of immoderation, so people that are high in neuroticism are more likely to give in to temptation. So I'm quite high in terms of neuroticism, and I'm terrible with things like food and stuff like that. I'll finish the whole pack of things and stuff like that. Luckily, it doesn't stray into anything more kind of serious, really. I don't kind of succumb to criminal temptations, thankfully, but it would include that as well. And impulsiveness. And then vulnerability, that's to panic, to states of panic. Okay, so it's all the kind of things that somebody that's how can we put this in a nutshell? So it's really I don't like the term negative emotions, because I think all emotions are there for a reason, but they're there. It's a susceptibility to a lot of the unpleasant emotions that we can experience, and psychological discomfort. Let's call it that, but not psychosis. Psychosis doesn't come into this. So hallucinations and delusions and things don't come into this pattern. This is more just your day-to-day kind of low level. Low to medium level mental health symptoms. Although if you were 100, it would be, you'd be getting to be quite high, but you wouldn't be. We're not really talking about things like schizophrenia and psychosis. So 2 facet breakdown, withdrawal and volatility. Okay, so somebody with high neuroticism is likely to avoid things. They're going to avoid parties, they're going to avoid job interviews, they're going to avoid situations that make them uncomfortable, they're going to avoid confrontation, they're going to avoid conflict or the potential of conflict, for example. Volatility means emotional volatility, which means that their moods can flare up, which might be flaring up into anger, might be flaring up into tears, might be going into a kind of a state of meltdown or breakdown or shutdown. So it's that kind of thing. Okay, so neuroticism, if you're high in neuroticism, it's not bad, but what that means is you will experience a lot of suffering, really. It's an unpleasant state of mind to be in, and your relationships with other people will be affected by that in a negative way. If you are too low in neuroticism, then you might be a psychopath, but more likely you could be just disconnected from emotion, but you'd be experienced by other people as quite cold and aloof. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are cold and aloof, but it would be quite hard to be empathic to other people if your experiences of these unpleasant emotional states is so minimal. It would be very hard for you to relate to other people and for other people to relate to you. So again, somewhere in the middle, or sort of 25% above is healthier than 1 or 2. 1 or 2 would be a problem. Okay. So we've talked about different levels with neuroticism. We've talked about it with agreeableness, extroversion. If your extroversion was too high, then you might be somebody that finds it quite hard to spend time on your own. And you might be a bit of a pain in the arse to other people. So on some levels, you could, high extroversion is, is great, and it can be very motivating. You could be the life and soul of the party. But sometimes people can tolerate that in short doses. So if you can imagine, like, a Brian Blessed kind of character, that's great for certain things, but would you want to go on a quiet camping holiday, taking in nature and restoring your frayed nerves with Brian Blessed? Probably not. So too low in extroversion, then you're going to be quite withdrawn. You're probably not going to engage with people very much, and that can be a problem. And of course, assertiveness, about standing up for yourself or other people, is really important. So again, if you're really low in extroversion, because it doesn't just mean what we generally think of as extroversion, it also means things like assertiveness, then you could fall prey to being, what they call the proverbial doormat. Another glug of water. All right. So, just backtracking again there. Conscientiousness. If you're really high in this, it's kind of a bit much. It might be okay in certain circumstances, but it's going to be really difficult for people around you. So if you think of, you're probably going to be quite demanding and controlling of other people, because your degree of demanding orderliness, orderliness is kind of fine if you're, if you live on your own and you're in charge of maintaining that orderliness and nobody kind of comes into your realm. But if you're kind of super extreme on orderliness, your tolerance for other people and their more normative or less extreme degree of orderliness is going to be quite difficult. So you do hear stories, of these extremely strict, what's the word? Parents that are, where everything's like a military, everything's sort of, regimented. It's very hard for other people that don't have that same degree of orderliness to fit in. Conscientiousness is great if you're in the military. It's fantastic. It's one of the things that they look for. So orderliness and industriousness. So industriousness, generally a good thing. I mean, generally a high conscientiousness is one of the big predictors of success. I'm not sure on what basis they measured success, but success in society, I guess, according to our societal values, no doubt. So industriousness, great, but it comes to a point where you could wear yourself out. You can overdo everything. It's an extreme. So low levels of orderliness and low levels of industriousness, not good. You're not going to achieve very much. You are, are you going to be able to maintain a job if you've got a really low level of orderliness? Are you going to maintain a relationship and a job if you've got low levels of industriousness and orderliness? You're not going to be very motivated. You're going to find it very hard to get work or keep work. You're probably not going to keep your house very tidy. You're probably going to be let lots of things slip, and that's going to make life quite difficult for you on that level. So somewhere in the middle again is kind of good. Somewhere in the middle, or higher than the middle, but not right at the not 100 is not good. That is going to be problematic, particularly if you want to live with other people. If you're a sergeant major and you're a bachelor, then it might work brilliantly for you. But if you want to have a loving relationship and be a parent to kids that you don't want to psychologically scar, then really extreme high conscientiousness is not going to be good. And in people that are high in conscientiousness often are quite demanding of other people as well, so they expect other people to behave in the same way as they do, and they're often not very tolerant of that. I'm going to come back to this one again because the relationship between these first two is really interesting. I'm sure the relationship between all of them is interesting, but this is one that I've looked into more than some of the others, and I've got more to say about than some of the others. So, openness to experience. So it's interesting that one of the things the 6 Facet Breakdown says is fantasy. So people that are very high in openness to experience can go off with the fairies. It's great to be imaginative, it's great to have that capacity for fantasy, but people who, not in a psychotic sense, but people who, so there are some people that experience delusions and hallucinations, and that's clearly something is going on in terms of what we would call psychosis, in terms of there's some activity, some pathological problematic activity is going on in the brain, and it's kind of thing that can be mediated with medication. But we're not talking about that kind of level. We're talking about somebody who has a very elastic belief system. Okay, and I like that. I didn't expect myself to say that, but I like it. A very elastic belief system. So somebody who's very high in openness to experience, their level of credulity might be quite low, and they will be dangerously open to influence from others as well. So somebody that is a major conspiracy theorist might be on this line. Not saying that all conspiracy theories are fantasy. I happen to think that a lot of them are probably conspiracy fact. We know there have always been conspiracies. One man's conspiracy is another man's reality. But people that swallow things whole, despite the fact that there's not much evidence to support the theory. So everybody probably supports, most people that are reasonably open to experience are probably lower in conscientiousness. This is how the two interact. Probably have some sympathy or openness to some conspiracy theories, but probably not all conspiracy theories. But if we're talking here about somebody that follows them all, and will often take people at face value. So, for example, when I used to know someone, I used to have a colleague that, it's interesting because ghost experiences as a whole fascinating thing, and I've done videos on that. But most people will either have a first or a second-hand ghost story that they can share with you. So it might not be their own, it might be second-hand, it might be, my dad said he saw something once, blah, blah, blah. But people who are very high in this degree of fantasy will have loads of them. And there will be minimal doubt that it was a ghost story. So I've met some people that have just told me loads and loads and loads of ghost stories, and I remember they were saying that there was one particular place where there's always this weird mist, and they felt that was some kind of ghostly thing. And of course, a place where there's lots of weird mist is, generally speaking, is because it's damp. So no, just swallowing swallowing things whole, really, would be that high degree. So being too high in openness to experience can make you fantasy prone. Not necessarily, but that's one of the effects of it. And it can get in the way of getting things done. And the intellect thing. So the intellect is so it's not about IQ or how intelligent or clever you are. It's about your interest and your ability to engage in abstract ideas and stuff like that. So you could have openness to experience and be a brilliant philosopher, or you could be high in openness to experience and just be a real kind of space cadet, because you're so lost in what is the meaning of the universe, and you forget to go to work. That's the kind of thing with this. Now, the interplay between openness to experience and conscientiousness. I mean, I might do a whole video on this. I probably will. But I'll just kind of touch on some of the dynamics between the two. So, people that are high in openness to experience and low in conscientiousness tend to be left-wing or liberal. Some people use it, liberal with a capital L, or Liberalism, Democrat, Labour, left-wing, socialist. And people who are on the right wing, so Republican, Conservative, are more likely to be high in conscientiousness and low in openness to experience. Okay. And those two combinations of people are really important, and we need both. We need people that are high in openness to experience and low in conscientiousness, and we need people that are the opposite. Because if you have too many people that are high in conscientiousness and low in openness to experience, particularly in politics, then nothing will ever change. Everything will be rigid, everything will be locked down, rules, there'll be no wavering of any rules, and things will become stagnant. Okay, so what you need is some people that are high in openness to experience and low in conscientiousness to shake things up a little bit. Okay, but if you have everybody high in openness to experience but low in conscientiousness, then there's no stability. There's because people are just going to keep coming up with really amazing ideas, but we don't want too many amazing ideas. We need to kind of, if you imagine a business where you start experimenting with different ways of working or whatever, and then but you never stop that. So every week you experiment with another completely off the wall, out of the box way of working, and then you do that again, and you do that again and again and again. The business would just fall apart because there'd be no stability. It'd be like people wouldn't know where they stand, they wouldn't know what they were doing, because it would all be changing all the time. The customers would be confused, the staff would be confused, everybody would be confused, and things would stop working. And it kind of becomes kind of wibbly wobbly, really. So what you need is this perfect blend of people that are high in this and low in that, low in this and high in that, together, to have that balance between holding things steady and also innovating, which is why we have this left and right in politics. With this liberal and conservative, we have this Democrat and Republican. Now, obviously, those terms mean other things. Okay, there are other connotations that come in with those terms, but broadly, in human organisation, in human politics, the way humans organise and get things done is with a combination of those two drives, really, the drive to innovate and the drive to maintain stability. And without those two together or working in tandem, even though they can be antagonistic, they make things work. They make the trains run on time. And that's why you get the swing from one to the other. Like here, for example, in New Zealand, politically, there's what we call the National Party and the Labour Party. There are other parties as well, but generally speaking, National get in for a few terms, and then Labour get in for a few terms, and then National get in for a few terms, and Labour get in for a few terms. Because, you know, by the time National have been in for a little while, people are fed up with, the rigidity, and they want something a bit newer and a bit more refreshing. And then if Labour have been in for a while, people feel like, you know, they've been too experimental, too open, you know, too innovative, and that, you know, actually we need to take a few steps back to, you know, more traditional values is the term that people often use. So I'm going to kind of end it there, I think, because I'm starting to lose my battery here. But that whole thing, the thing that I've ended on is it's just fascinating, and Jordan Peterson has lots to say about that, but I've got thoughts on that as well, which might materialise in another video. In fact, I think they probably will. But for now, that is the 5-factor model. I hope I've explained it in a way that enables you to get a sense of it. But there are other things that you can look at, and I think maybe the combination of looking at this and using this as an overall structure, and then watching some of the other stuff, particularly the Dr. Todd Grande stuff, will give you a good overall grasp of it, and it's something maybe you can start to use to assess yourself and assess other people, and start to assess the relationship between you and other people, how you interact, because, you know, the dynamic. This explains, you know, a personality profile of one person, but then if you put, you know, 2 different personality profiles together and compare and contrast, it can give you a good idea of how the dynamics might be, and where areas where you might understand one another or not understand one another, or how you might fit into the culture of an organization, because cultures of organizations will also reflect this. They'll mirror some of these qualities as well. So I think it's a fantastic model, and yeah, check it out. It's, you know, you're not going to get your head around it overnight. It takes a while to feel your way into this, but have a crack at maybe at one of the questionnaires, but get somebody that knows you to do it as well, and then do a mean of the 2. See if you think it fits, and discuss it with the other person. You know, it's really enlightening. And really easy to do. The questionnaires are really quick. They don't take you very long at all, and you can do them for free. So thank you for bearing with me on this long, complex, rambling video looking at the jazzy screen. I hope you're as excited about this model as I am. And thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and do all those kinds of things. And Rangi Marie.